glorious gamers out there. Welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that helps us out even more. And if you've already done that for us, thank you so much. You're an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. Good to see you as ever. How's things with you?
Not bad at all. Are we ready to talk about Elden Ring? Because that's definitely what this next bit's going to be for weeks and weeks and weeks still. I've still not even beat the second, or I've beat the second boss. I've not even remotely entertained going for the third boss yet.
Yeah, so tell us where you're at, Mark. What's going on?
I'm going to tell everyone where we're at. I think that I've sort of kind of caught up to you. Managed to put in a good number of hours over the weekend, which was absolutely fantastic, I've got to say. I have caught up with you in terms of level, I should say. However, you do seem to be still a good little chunk ahead of me in terms of the actual critical path story, I would say. But man, I'm loving it. I'm totally there, man. I'm totally there.
Good.
I'm now using Bloodhound's Fang, which is a significant upgrade, I would say, over the Uchigatana that I was using before. I was saying before that I wasn't massively enamoured with the combat. However, I've basically done an entire 180 on that list. I absolutely fucking love it now. I'd also been saying that I hadn't really engaged with any of the summons or the incantations, which is largely because of the nature, basically, of Elden Ring. I totally missed 2 quite key characters to speak to regarding incantations and summons, so I couldn't even do summons for the vast majority of my playthrough so far. But now that I have done that and have beat the first couple of bosses, I'm like, oh yes, this is fantastic. This is absolutely fantastic. There's just so much to it as well. There's so many layers to the combat. It's just very technically impressive, apart from anything else, do you know what I mean? And Lewis, as I said, I have to report, I am now past that From Software imaginary line whereby I'm basically thinking about Elden Ring all the time. I basically want to be playing it all the time. It's absolutely fantastic, and you're going to be surprised to hear me say this, and I think that this might be a bold call, Lewis, but I think this game is really good.
You're an outlier there in terms of opinion, Mike. No, it feels to me like you're almost reiterating things that I was saying, a month or so ago. When,
to be honest with you, I probably am.
I went through that same journey with the combat, which I still slightly prefer elements of Bloodborne's combat, but it's a minor thing when as you say, there's so much to the combat systems in this game. There's so many layers to it. The variations, and if you just watch anyone else playing on YouTube or whatever, you can see a huge variety of different approaches to this game that you can take, both in terms of where you go and how you play it. And yeah, similarly to you, after probably a similar amount of hours as you've put in over the last few days, I was at that moment of thinking, this is just fantastic. I can't wait to explore more. I just want to see more of this game and really get lost in it. So, as you say, yeah, I'm only a little bit ahead of you now. Basically, for people in the know, I've just done the Academy of Rhea Lucaria, and I'm kind of just mopping up Liurnia now. I guess we've done different parts of exploration, and obviously I've spent my runes differently because I've not leveled up. Well, actually I'm at the same level as you now, I think, although I don't know what you got to in the last night of playing, but
55-ish, I think.
55?
Yeah,
I think I'm 53 at the moment, something like that. After,
okay, there you go.
The latter boss of that area gives you a shit ton of runes, which is great.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I calculated as well that I'm sitting on about 40,000 runes in the form of golden runes that I use a lot more sparingly than you, I think, because I basically always...
Yeah, that's bananas, man.
I use them. It was the way I did it in Bloodborne as well. Like, I use them to get me over the line. So if I'm 1,000 runes away from a level up, I will go to level up and just spend some of them at that point, rather than crunch them all now and level up probably like 3 or 4 times. But after that, I would have nothing to, I more risk of losing a lot of runes if I don't have some. That's kind of been my take on things. But
well, I mean, don't use them unless you're going to immediately spend them, I would say. Be sensible about that as well. But if you can level up 3 or 4 times and you want to keep some, then level up 3 times instead of 4
I'll do
times.
That. But I mean, I'm getting on fine. As I say, I've beaten the 2 bosses in that zone. I just journeyed down into another one of the kind of river worlds that are down the big elevators. I've found the second one now.
Oh, nice, cool.
You're not far from it, I'll say that. But, it's completely optional, and I got to a point where this absolutely monstrous beast started projectile firing at me, and I thought, I'm going to come back to this. I'm not going to do this just now. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what's next, even on the critical path. I think maybe I have to go to Caelid next, but I'm not really sure. And there's definitely stuff in the northwest of Liurnia that I still need to do. So this game is just enormous. I don't think we're even like a quarter of the way through the main story yet, to be totally honest. So
no, I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. We're going to be playing this for months, man. We're going to be playing this for months.
Well, you won't be.
Months.
You're absolutely battering through it.
Well, I don't know. Like, I don't really feel as though I am. I beat 2 of the critical path bosses. You've beat more of them than me. You're technically further down the critical path than I am.
But you've played almost the same amount of hours as me in about 10 days as I've done since pretty much since launch. So, you're going to gallop past me, no bother.
Well, I'm about 35-ish hours in, I think. And for at least 5 of them, in fact, probably more than that, I could have went and taken on the bosses and whatever in the second sort of Soulsian designed area, which is the Academy of Rhea Lucaria, right? I could have done that by now, but I felt absolutely zero compulsion to go and do that whatsoever.
Yeah,
because, to be honest, I'm just enjoying running around the world and doing loads of different things. Like, I've beat so many optional bosses. It's unbelievable. It's fantastic. There's always another thing to be doing, and I'm just like, oh, I'll explore a little bit over here. As you said, there's stuff in the northwest of the map as we see it right now, and I've done a little bit up there, sort of dabbled up there, just come all the way around in a sort of big circle around the lake that's in the middle where Rhea Lucaria is, and I was just like, oh, I just wanted to do this. I just want to sort of complete the map, whereas it sounds as though what you've done is you've went, oh well, we'll go and take on these bosses, then we'll sort of clean up the map, whereas I've sort of done that in reverse, it maybe sounds like,
Yeah, I did about half or 3/4 of Liurnia. It's just that northwest corner really, and then the bit that kind of joins it to what I assume is the next region, kind of beyond the bridge at the Academy. So I did most of my exploring there. I cleared most of the minor dungeons, but I just reached a point where it felt like it was pushing me towards the legacy dungeon, and I thought, well, I'll just go and see how I got on. And it's tough. There's some tough enemies in there. There was one room that you'll get to that has got normal enemies, and it's not a boss room, but I've died in that room more than I have on any of the bosses thus far. So there's some tricky bits in there as well. But yeah, it's just phenomenal. We could talk about this for hours. I would love to do a topic of the week sometime where we just talk about it for the whole 20 minutes. But people have probably had their fill already.
Yeah, I think that we have to move on from our Elden Ring portion of the podcast. Again, this will be a feature for many, many months to come, ladies and gentlemen, so buckle up for more of this. But Lewis, I think it is time for the news. Alright, Lewis, news item number 1. Xbox Live has had some serious problems with outages this week, Lewis. So far as I can work out, the outages started on May the 6th, and at time of recording it is May the 11th, and the problems still don't seem to have been entirely resolved from what I can work out. However, it does appear to be less widespread than it had been over the weekend, where I think it was particularly bad. Now, you might be thinking, outages happen, whatever, like this one was particularly long, but what's the big deal sort of thing? The big deal, ladies and gentlemen, is Xbox's DRM policy, which is not good. DRM, for those that don't know, is Digital Rights Management, which is ostensibly a means of managing copyrighted digital material, but in reality is just the ghost in the background of gaming reminding us that we actually own absolutely fuck all loose. And all of that sort of sounds fine, but if implemented badly, it can actually cause a lot of problems, and I think someone who has implemented it badly is, unfortunately, Xbox. Basically, every digital game you have downloaded on your Xbox has to do an online DRM check before the game launches. So if your Xbox cannot connect to Xbox Live, say it's went down for several days, Liz, that means even if you have downloaded a game onto your console, which you have bought with your own money, you cannot play that game. This goes for all digital games as well, like whether the game itself requires an online connection or not is irrelevant, you know what I mean? Even an entirely single-player game still has to go through this process. And considering Xbox have been heavily pushing their budget or entry-level all-digital Series S console of late, Lewis, I think that this is particularly egregious. It is worth pointing out as well that this policy from Xbox is completely unnecessary, as neither Sony nor Nintendo have policies like this. And in fact, an example was used that if PlayStation's servers were to go down permanently tomorrow, nearly every single PlayStation game would work offline permanently without a single problem, and I assume that the same is true of Nintendo. So, on the 9th of May, which is 2 days ago as we are recording this, Xbox have said that they will fully fix the issue via an update in the coming days, quotes. However, to the best of my knowledge, that has not yet been rolled out, so there is still problems out there, despite the fact that it's nowhere near as bad as it had been. Basically, I think that this DRM stuff is totally unnecessary from Xbox. It's pretty bullshit, let's be honest, as well. I think for a company that in recent years has been all about pro-consumer moves and presenting as though they are like the best place for consumers to be, I really, really think that that has to change. It is clearly nonsense.
It definitely is, yeah. This has been a pretty shitty weekend to be an Xbox player, I imagine. I don't know if it was a total outage for everyone, but there was enough people complaining about this online and keeping the noise going, because Xbox at various points sort of tweeted out to say that they had fixed it essentially, or had just about fixed it, and people then had to keep replying saying, nope, I still can't play these games.
Yeah, I think in Europe specifically they said, oh, you shouldn't have a problem in Europe anymore. Then everyone in Europe basically went, nope, hard disagree, Xbox, still not working.
It's a really bad situation, this, because there's one side of it, which is obviously Xbox's heavy move towards streaming and digital downloads and all that kind of stuff, which that would be bad enough if that stuff, essentially renders your console basically unusable if it's not got a disk drive. But the fact that this is affecting single player offline games, disc-based games potentially, there's been some reports of that as well. You should not, as a gamer who has paid their money, whether for a full game or whether for a subscription, be in a position that a simple loss of an internet connection means that you're done. You're not gaming this weekend. You're not gaming for 4, 5, 6 days as this outage goes. And obviously you have no idea how long it's going to be until these things get fixed. For a company that is so focused on consumer management, consumer relationship building, all of that stuff, they've got this one badly wrong. And you've got to hope that this is a wake-up call, because the outrage that Xbox gamers will have been shoveling towards Microsoft in the last few days must be pretty intense. It's a real turn-off to the new consoles as well, I would say. If you've not got one yet, you think you could be in a position where you pay $500 and you sit down to play it and it just doesn't work and there's nothing you can do.
I actually think that this all stems back to the Xbox One launch. Remember in those days, they initially wanted to have the Xbox One requiring an internet connection at all times. Yeah. This is part of the reason why the Xbox One launch was a total fucking car crash, by the way. And I think that it finds its roots there. But yeah, Xbox really have to do something about this. This is crazy. Like, the fact that the other two major platform holders don't have policies anywhere near as stringent as this makes me think, well, why are you doing it? Do you know what I mean? It seems totally obstructive to your gamers to play on the console that they've spent a lot of money to play on. It's just crazy. This is really unbelievably stupid. DRM is bad generally, I would say, but yeah, Xbox's implementation of it here really is very, very poor indeed, and something that has to change, because it's just not on. Alright, Loose News item number 2. EA have officially announced their split from FIFA and have launched EA Sports FC in its place. This comes after months of speculation that EA were considering dropping the FIFA name from their football franchise, particularly after it was revealed that EA would have been expected to pay double the price for the FIFA name, which would have been somewhere around the $2.5 billion mark over the next decade. Executive Vice President and General Manager of EA Sports Cam Webber has said this regarding the split. Now, this one is quite long, but I thought it would be easier to let Mr. Webber explain the situation rather than me regurgitate his words at you, ladies and gentlemen. So, Lewis, take it away.
I want to start by thanking this incredible community of more than 150 million fans for helping build the world's biggest football entertainment platform, EA Sports FIFA. After nearly 30 years of creating genre-defining interactive football experiences, we will soon begin an exciting new era. Next year, EA Sports FC will become the future of football from EA Sports. Alongside our 300-plus licensed partners across the sport, we're ready to take global football experiences to new heights on behalf of all football fans around the world. Everything you love about our games will be part of EA Sports FC. The same great experiences, modes, leagues, tournaments, clubs and athletes will be there. Ultimate Team, Career Mode, Pro Clubs and Volta Football will all be there. Our unique licensing portfolio of more than 19,000 plus players, 700 plus teams, 100 plus stadiums and 30 leagues that we've continued to invest in for decades will still be there, uniquely in EA Sports FC. That includes exclusive partnerships with the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, Serie A, the MLS and more to come. This new independent platform will bring fresh opportunity to innovate, create and evolve. This is much more than just a change of symbol. As EA Sports, we're committed to ensuring EA Sports FC is a symbol of change. We're dedicated to meaningfully reinvesting in the sport, and we're excited to work with a large and increasing number of partners to expand to new, authentic experiences that bring joy, inclusivity, and immersion to a global community of fans. I look forward to sharing more detail on these plans in the coming months. EA Sports FC will allow us to realise this future and much more, but not before we deliver our most expansive game ever with our current naming rights partner FIFA for one more year. We're committed to ensuring the next FIFA is our best ever, with more features, game modes, World Cup content, clubs, leagues, competitions and players than any FIFA title before. We're incredibly excited to build the future of global football with all of you, and we'll be happy to share more info on EA Sports FC in summer 2023.
So basically the message here is everything about FIFA that you like will still be there, including the players and the clubs, but we are dedicated to meaningful change, which, as much as I hate to agree with EA on basically anything, Lewis, I do think that is probably what they should be doing with their football franchise moving forward. Whether or not this meaningful change actually comes to fruition remains to be seen, I suppose, but God knows the game fucking needs it, Lewis. It really does. FIFA have also published a press release regarding the split, which includes a bizarre statement from actual FIFA president Gianni Infantino. I am going to preface this by saying that this man's first language is not English. Lewis, take it away.
I can assure you that the only authentic, real game that has the FIFA name will be the best one available for gamers and football fans. The FIFA name is the only global original title. FIFA 23, FIFA 24, FIFA 25 and FIFA 26 and so on. The constant is the FIFA name, and it will remain forever and remain the best, all caps. The interactive gaming and esports sector is on a path of unrivaled growth and diversification. FIFA's strategy is to ensure we can make the most of all future options and ensure a wide range of products and opportunities for gamers, fans, member associations and partners.
The only original title, eh? I should have probably prefaced that by saying as well, this man clearly doesn't know his arse from his elbow when it comes to video games, and the only thing he probably knows about the FIFA games is how much money he makes from them. As you can probably tell from that mostly ludicrous statement, this actually got weirdly heated, with EA saying that FIFA was just the name on the box and that the license had impeded their ambitions for the game. And FIFA have also said that they would like to license games to multiple publishers rather than just have FIFA exclusively with one publisher, which, I mean, also is sort of what FIFA should be doing as well, I guess, really. Anyway, Lewis, it looks as though for the first time in a long time, we will have serious competition in the video game space when it comes to the glorious sport of football.
It certainly does seem that way, yeah. Typical FIFA following the path set by Pro Ev by changing its name all of a sudden. Odd that we find ourselves kind of within about a year or so with neither of these franchises that we grew up with and that have essentially defined the only competition in the football gaming space over the last 2 decades or whatever.
Yeah. Certainly in our lifetimes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Let's hope it does lead to more competition. We've talked before about what FIFA might do next in terms of selling the name, probably to 2K, but just because that makes the most sense.
If it wasn't 2K. I genuinely would.
Whether they can diversify and go in other directions as well. I mean, I would imagine this is going to lead to mobile games with the FIFA brand on them and lead to, I don't know, say a Football Manager style game or whatever, all sorts of stuff. FIFA's only thing is about making money. FIFA don't care about anything except money. And in that sense, both they
can you tell that Lewis is a bitter football fan, ladies and gentlemen?
I mean, they're bad. They're bad news. But this whole story is the two arseholes in your school fighting each other and you don't actually know which one you would prefer to get battered because they're just, there's nothing likeable about either of them. Some of the noises that EA are making here about...
They're making the right noises.
It's interesting, right? This stuff about making FIFA, or EA Sports FC, sorry, a symbol of change going forward. What does that mean? What could that possibly mean? The game is not going to be significantly different from the existing FIFA games, I don't think. They would be killing their own cash cow if they change it too much. And at the same time, they're not about to start giving away all the profit from Ultimate Team to grassroots football, which is kind of what is hinted at here, and I'd be interested to see, because they talk about supporting the game. It would be interesting to see if they do announce some stuff like that, because at that point, that could be really interesting, that could be really good. And there's a sly dig, I think, at FIFA within that statement where they say we are committed to...
there's more than one list.
Well, definitely more than one, but they say, what is it he says about sort of, committed to genuine change in the football industry or whatever. that's what FIFA's supposed to do, and as an institution they aren't, they're robbers. And so it's been long coming, this, but EA Sports FC, don't love the name, expect it to be very much the same game as people are used to. The key thing in all of this, well, two key things I suppose, is one, does this translate to your average gamer who buys a console and buys FIFA every year and that's kind of all that they do? Will they understand this? Will they see EA Sports FC on the shelf next year and buy that? Or if FIFA gets its shit together and sells the license to another company who can produce FIFA 2K23 or whatever it might be with the FIFA name front and centre, will that actually still be the most popular sports game in the world? I think that's a fascinating question. We've seen sports games change names before. It's not impossible to do, but this is a big, big one.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think that is the ultimate question here, really. Will the FIFA name carry as much weight as FIFA think that it will? Because I do think that it will carry an enormous amount of weight, and I do think that people will see FIFA on the shelf, whether it be FIFA 2K24 or whatever the hell it's going to be, and just pick it up and just be like, oh, the new FIFA's out, great. Do you know what I mean? See EA Sports FC, or EAFC as I strongly suspect it will end up being called, by the way, on the shelf, and just be like, oh, well, that's the new thing, that's the thing that has to break in now, do you know what I mean? Whereas the FIFA name is long established in this space. So yeah, very interesting to see how this turns out. Very interesting to see Lewis Camley's feelings on FIFA boil up on the podcast, which was absolutely lovely. Very interested to see if EA actually change anything here, because I really hope that they do in a lot of ways, but yeah, it's sort of difficult to imagine, isn't it?
Yeah.
Alright, Lewis, news item number 3. Following Nintendo's investors call on Tuesday this week, industry insider Piers Harding-Rolls of Ampere Analysis has said that a Switch successor will be at least 2 years away. Can I just say, Piers Harding-Rolls has absolutely nailed posh boy name. It's so posh it sounds made up. It's insane. Which actually, to be honest with you, a new Switch console coming in 2 years sort of makes a bit of sense. In 2024, the Switch will then be 7 years old, which was the same age as the PS4 and the Xbox One were before the new console generation came out. However, I do think that it's safe to say that the Switch maybe already feels a bit dated and a bit older than those consoles did during that transition, I suppose, just because of the console's lack of power. And now we have the Steam Deck showing what is actually capable on a handheld device, you know? Nintendo have also announced that they have now sold 107.6 million Switch units, making it the 5th best-selling console of all time, now just behind the PlayStation 4, and definitely within shooting distance of the PlayStation 2's record of 155 million. And this enormous number is almost certainly why Nintendo are dragging their heels around getting a Switch 2 out there, Liz, because since the launch of the PlayStation 5 and the Series X, the Switch has still been the highest selling console over that time. And yes, will the chip shortage and whatever played into that? Yes, it will. But nonetheless, the best selling console right now is still the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo's president, Shantaro Furukawa, has said this week that the eventual transition to new hardware is quote-unquote a major concern for the company. Furukawa has said this during a Q&A with investors.
We have already announced a portion of our software roadmap releasing up to next spring. Unlike the past, we continue to have a large variety of games scheduled to be released, even beyond 5 years of release. This is because the Nintendo Switch has had such a smooth launch, allowing us to focus all of our development resources on a single platform. However, the question of whether we will be able to just as smoothly transition from the Nintendo Switch to the next generation of hardware is a major concern for us. Based on our experiences with the Wii, Nintendo DS and other hardware, it is very clear that one of the major obstacles is how to easily transition from one hardware to the next. To help alleviate this risk, we're focusing on building long-term relationships with our customers. While we continue launching new software on the Nintendo Switch, we will also provide services that also use Nintendo accounts and other IP outside of gaming software. We intend for this to help build a lasting impact with our customers.
Furukawa is hinting there that Nintendo have previously followed wild success like the DS and the Wii with comparative failures, the 3DS, and abject failure, the Wii U. So Nintendo have a bit of history here with not transitioning their player base particularly well, is what I will say. And that player base, I think, is all important to them now. They've really re-established themselves after a couple of flubs there, do you know what I mean? But Lewis, what do you make of all this? Like, do you think that this sounds like a good sort of timeline for the Switch 2? Do you think it's a little bit late? What are your thoughts?
Sort of mixed thoughts, to be honest, Mark, on this one, because 2 years away, if that's an accurate prediction, that seems okay. Like, the hardware is definitely creaking, but I'm not expecting too many more major games to come to it, other than Breath of the Wild 2, really. I'm sure, we might get another Mario game or something like that, but I imagine those things are going to play okay on this. And other than that, we can kind of last 2 years, but I think this transition is all important. I'm sort of encouraged slightly by what they're saying here, that they do recognise that history, and I've been concerned for a while that they will do what they often do, which is just to kind of abandon a format after the end of its life cycle and do something completely new, because that's kind of Nintendo's way, right? It's like, bring out a new toy, be the new exciting thing. But I think they should look at the success of the Switch and kind of realise that this is the future for them. This handheld to docked hybrid console has really worked. It works well for their games. It fits their brand completely. And if they want to keep that goodwill of 100 odd million users, just transition smoothly and allow people to continue that lifespan, essentially, right? Like, please, God, do not bring out something completely different and then resell as all the same games. Like, have some kind of backwards compatibility feature here. Just build on what the Switch is. If you do that 107 million is going to continue to grow and grow. And, we can look at the Switch family eventually and say it's the most successful console ever, potentially. Yeah, please just don't reset again, Nintendo. You've got to have learned that lesson by now. And it sounds from this statement like maybe they have.
Well, it is worth pointing out as well that Furukawa has also previously said that he was looking at backwards compatibility for the next hardware as well, which is very good to hear. I think everyone will agree. Yep. Because, they don't want to lose this insane player base that they've now built up. And as you said, this fits their brand perfectly. Do you know what I mean? Nintendo have always had handhelds. They've always had home consoles as well. Their home consoles were wavering and the handheld was wavering. But suddenly you smash those two things together, Liz, and then you've got over 100 million sales. Alright, Liz, news item number 4. Sony FCO Hikiro Totokai has reiterated that he believes that the quality of PlayStation first-party games would decline if they were to be added to a subscription service on day one. Now, this has very much become the company line, Lewis, when it comes to bringing PlayStation first-party games onto subscription services. After announcing the new PlayStation Plus tiered system, which obviously includes a Games Pass-esque subscription service, PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan confirmed that PlayStation first-party games would not be on that service day one, citing that he too thought that it would cause a decline in the quality of PlayStation's first-party games. Both Totokai and Ryan have basically said that in order for it to make business sense to bring first-party games to PlayStation Plus on day one, they would effectively need to invest less in the games in the first place. They would have to invest less in their first-party lineup. If this is true, Liz, I have to say, as a primarily PlayStation gamer, I am happy with this decision if that is true. The reason I am primarily a PlayStation gamer is because of the quality of PlayStation's first-party lineup. Like, in my eyes anyway, PlayStation rarely miss when it comes to their first-party games. They are generally of a very, very high quality, and to let that waver in any capacity, I would argue, would be to tarnish one of the main selling points of being a PlayStation gamer, you know? To swing this onto Games Pass a little bit, Lewis, Games Pass, somewhat unbelievably, will be 5 years old in June. And despite being an enormous success, and I think it is undeniably an enormous success, I still don't think that there has been an absolutely knockout release on Games Pass day one. Xbox fans might fight me over that, and that is absolutely fine. But if we're talking about something like The Last of Us or God of War 2018 or something like that, do you know what I mean? Something that is just all-consuming and everyone seems to be talking about it, is just entirely in the gaming zeitgeist. I'm not really sure that has happened on Games Pass with a day one game. Do you know what I mean? I thought that might have been Halo, but I think with the benefit of hindsight, that game's starting to wobble a little bit on the multiplayer side, which is bringing it a little bit of bad blood, and it's just a whole thing. And maybe that game is still to come with some of the major acquisitions that Xbox have made. But now that we hear this coming out of PlayStation, do you think that the reason Xbox haven't had like a generation defining game launch on Games Pass day one Is the reason for that just because they can't justify the spend it would take to make that sort of game and put it on Games Pass day one? And just so that I'm not turning a Sony story into a bashing on Xbox story, conversely, I suppose, do you think the PlayStation subscription service is limiting its potential success by not having those types of games on at day one?
Oh, that is a pair of massive questions, to be honest. I think, again, I've said this before, I think this is absolutely fascinating. I think someone at some point has to dig into the economics of all of this and start to get to the heart of the matter and find out what the truth here is. Because it's starting with the PlayStation side, it makes sense what they're saying, right? That if they put their biggest games, their most popular games that sell consoles out onto a Game Pass style subscription day one, they can't generate the same kind of cash. I accept that. That on paper makes sense and it's hard to argue with. But I still come back to something like Ghost of Tsushima, which a couple of months back they announced had sold like 7 million units, and there was a sort of big celebration moment from kind of PlayStation's Twitter and all that stuff. That number, I still think that a game like Ghost of Tsushima coming to a subscription service, that might add enough numbers to that subscription service that the money is recouped anyway. There's a straight up bunch of sums there that just need to be done to see at what point does that tip from one place to the other. At what point does the subscription deliver more players, you know?
Well, I think that does make sense, man. Like, I think that's really important because I think that game will end up on whatever subscription service PlayStation are making, but it might be when the Legends DLC came out, do you know what I mean? And then suddenly that gives the game a little boost and it's coming to the subscription service, do you know what I mean? So they're sort of looking to have the best of both worlds, basically, PlayStation, in my eyes, you know?
Which, again, makes a lot of sense from a business perspective because you're thinking, I can get the sales and then I can mop up later. But I contend that a lot of people will stop buying those games day and date if they think that they are going to come to their subscription service down the line. Particularly those mid-tier games. Like, I think most people will still play Last of Us day and date. Most people will still pick up God of War 2. But would a lot of people have slept on Returnal, for example, if they knew that 6 months later it would be added to a service? I think that is genuinely the case. So you might find, for a game like that to come to a subscription service day and date would be beneficial versus one of their bigger games, which I can understand that they might not want to do that. It might not make business sense to do that. But how do you start carving up your catalogue like that? I think that's tricky. And flipping it to the Xbox side really quickly, I think that there's a lot of reasons why they failed to do that, why they failed to really launch a top tier game onto the service. Yeah, sure, we can blame Game Pass itself. I think that there is a strong argument for that. We've talked off air a lot about how the service itself, for getting Xbox first party games, it's kind of swimming in sevens a lot of the time. There's a lot of decent games on there, but it's about filling a library. It's very much the Netflix of gaming in that sense, that it's got a library that is kind of full of stuff that you're not that bothered about a lot of the time. But for their own first party games, I think that they've just for a generation now failed to deliver. It's not Game Pass's fault that games at the start of the Xbox One generation weren't hitting the heights. They've failed to have a major, Game of the Year contender for quite a while now, as I recall. So I don't think you can pin that squarely on Game Pass. I do think that Game Pass forces them down certain avenues, or may encourage them down certain avenues around the types of games that they'll put out. They will probably lean towards multiplayer games and microtransaction heavy games in the future because that's how they can make extra money on top of the subscription. But yeah, I think there's a much deeper post-mortem to be done on what's not worked for Xbox for the last generation. I think Forza is the only game that landed and didn't really come with baggage down the line, as you were describing for Halo.
Yeah, very possibly. I think that on the Xbox side, Phil Spencer has done a magnificent job of turning the whole thing around, let's be honest. But yeah, the beginning of the generation wasn't good, and I still think that a lot of their historic IP is dragging them down a little bit. But creaking, with all these acquisitions and whatever, I do think that something big is on the horizon for Xbox. I genuinely do believe that, and I hope that they do launch something incredible on the service day one. But as you said, you don't want to be swimming in sevens. Look at what's happening to Netflix. Alright, Lewis, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1, Trek to Yomi has come out this week. This was the 2D side-scrolling game that looked like Ghost of Tsushima meets Sifu and is very Kurosawa-inspired. It is currently sitting with a 70 on PlayStation 5, a 74 on Xbox, and a 73 on PC, which is a little bit underwhelming with all the will in the world here, Lewis. Particularly because I thought it looked pretty interesting. And speaking of Xbox Games Pass games swimming in sevens, this is a game that came to Xbox Games Pass on day one, Just an interesting point of comparison, Lewis. It does seem as though everyone can basically agree that this game looks amazing, but unfortunately it seems as though it is pretty let down by its gameplay and its mechanics, specifically when it comes to combat, which seems to be pretty one note and pretty janky, it seems.
Yeah, a wee bit disappointing in this one. I still think it'll be worth giving it a look at some point, not least because visually it does look really impressive and it seems like it'd be
really
worth
nice
experiencing for that. But I think we were all hoping for a slightly better score, and it's another game, as you say, on my Game Pass subscription that I'm kind of like, okay, I'll get around to that at some point then. And they're stacking up.
All right, let's shout out number 2. Salt and Sacrifice has come out this week as well. This is the 2D Souls-like game, which is a sequel to 2016's Salt and Sanctuary, which me and you played a little bit, Lewis. It's currently sitting with a 72 on PC. The game is also available for PlayStation, but there's not enough reviews on PlayStation to aggregate a score. I think that this is a little bit disappointing as well, considering that the original game got a score in the mid-8s. It very much seems as though perhaps the game's ambition is actually working against it here. There seems to be a lot of elements stuffed into the game, even on top of all the Souls-like stuff, and basically I'm not sure that's really working for it, which is a shame, because when it comes to smaller studios, I really like to applaud ambition, but when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And unfortunately here, it really seems as though it doesn't work.
Yeah, a bit of a shame, this one. I can't say I loved the bit of the first game that we played, but I think that was before.
Me neither, to be honest, yeah.
I'm kind of putting that down to not being into Souls games at that point, and maybe if we revisited it now, it'd be different. But yeah, I don't imagine I'm going to be playing this one at all.
No, a bit of a shame, though. Alright, shout out number 3. It has been announced that Gotham Knights will no longer be releasing on the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One, which is pretty surprising to me considering the amount of player base there between those two consoles is still pretty significant. And considering as well just how hard it's been over the last couple of years to get a current gen console, you know? Apparently this was done to give gamers quote unquote the best possible gameplay experience, but I strongly suspect it was just so they didn't have to develop for 2 additional consoles on top of the current gen consoles list. I have to say, while I think that this is a surprising move, it's actually quite a welcome one for me. While I appreciate it has been difficult for many people to get a current gen console, we are now a year and a half into this console cycle, and it would be really good to start to see games dedicated to these 2 systems and to really start to push the hardware. I understand that that's a fine balancing act with people simply not being able to get those consoles or be able to play those games that are exclusive to the current gen, you know, but for me this is sort of welcome newsless.
Yeah, I think this is a strange one. It doesn't seem a natural candidate to lose its last gen editions because, yeah,
not at all. It's a multiplayer game.
It's a multiplayer game, yeah. So you need a player base. It's also a licensed game. It's a Batman game, so you've got a potentially enormous audience who won't all have new gen consoles, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's also a game that a lot of people have been waiting for quite some time for because we've not had anything. Although this is actually WB Montreal, we've not had anything in that same vein as the Rocksteady Arkham games since, I think, 2015 Arkham Knight came out, 2015, 16, something like that.
A long time now, yeah.
So, that's 7 years people have been waiting for something, and if you've not been able to upgrade your console yet, you're kind of being cut off here. And honestly, I've not seen anything in any of the footage we've been shown of this game that makes me think that it couldn't run just fine on old hardware. So maybe it is a cost-cutting thing. It's about not wanting to spend the development time, but a strange decision. Not the game I would have picked to do this for, you know?
No, and I would totally agree with you, Lewis. I've watched the 14 minutes of footage, which they've also just released along with this announcement, basically, and there's nothing in there that makes me suggest it wouldn't be able to run on an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4. I do genuinely just think that this is a cost-cutting exercise because, as we know, the development time for this has run on quite a bit. Alright, and final shout out number 4, Lewis. EA have announced a partnership with Middle-earth Enterprises to make a new Lord of the Rings mobile game. Now, I know basically everyone has heard that and been like, oh yeah, so what? And I would also pretty much suggest that you maybe not play this one because I would strongly suspect that it is microtransaction laden and horrible to play. However, while EA do have previous with the Lord of the Rings license, almost all Lord of the Rings games have been published by the license holder Warner Brothers in recent years. Obviously, it has been widely reported that WB are trying to sell their gaming division and license out their own IP, much like Marvel have done. We're not really sure what's going on with their gaming division, but basically it seems as though they want shot of it. I'm not really sure that this is indicative of anything in particular, Lewis. Maybe if it was a AAA game, we might be having a different conversation. But it is at least showing that WB are open to licensing their games to other publishers, you know?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I like you say, I'm not really interested in what this game is going to be. I kind of suspect it's going to end up being a bit like a Genshin Impact clone with a Lord of the Rings style skin over it. I don't know about that question around the licenses though, because you said that it's Middle-earth games, and I don't know if that's maybe an offshoot of the Tolkien estate or something, and maybe, you know, like these deals we've seen in the past where there's like a movie licensee and then there's a games licensee, blah blah blah. I just wonder whether it's a slightly different thing, in that because there's that Gollum game in the pipeline as well just now that I don't think WB are behind that either. So yeah, one way or another, at least the kind of Middle-earth Lord of the Rings stuff is being splintered out. How Amazon will respond to that when they launch their enormously expensive TV show, you can imagine that if Amazon are ever going to make a serious play in the gaming space again, that they might well want to work with a sort of Middle-earth license. But yeah, there we are. Let's see what EA announce from this one. I'm not expecting a great deal, to be honest.
No, me neither, and that is a good point about the Gollum game as well. I suppose I'm just fascinated to see what's happening with WB, because there's just been so many rumours around about them, do you know what I mean? And to get EA on board, do you know what I mean, a serious player in the video game publishing space, do you know what I mean, was just an interesting announcement to me, something to keep an eye on, I would say. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is Nintendo's Indie World Showcase, Lewis, which only just happened a few hours ago. Yeah,
just earlier today, Nintendo treated us to another Indie Showcase, about 25 minutes long, so we're just going to rattle through what was announced and share some thoughts on some of the more interesting games on the list. So let's just get cracking, Mark. There's quite a lot to get through here. First up, we had Ooblets from developers Glumberland. Looks a bit like a mashup of Pokemon and sort of Animal Crossing
or something, right? Yeah.
And coming out this summer on Switch. It's actually been out on early access on Epic and Xbox for about 2 years, but it's finally kind of getting its proper release now. I think it will be on those platforms still as well, but there it is on Nintendo. Then next up was Batora Lost Haven. This from Stormmind Games and Team 17. It's coming out in the fall. It's a kind of, I don't know, story-driven RPG. Looks like it's got some twin stick shooter elements, bit of action, bit of fighting, but they were going heavy on the decisions are important, and I don't know, we've had debates before about how important decisions ever are in games like this, so
yeah.
didn't stand out to me as anything special. Next up, though, was Electhead, Mark. This is a game from a solo developer, Nama Takahashi, which we've seen before at other showcases now and again. I think it's been out on Steam for a while. It's one that I've been really interested in, and I was really hoping it would come to Switch eventually. It's coming out this summer. It's a simple, intuitive little platform puzzler. Any interest in this one, Mark?
Yeah, man, this was one of the ones that I think stood out quite a bit. As you said, I do think that this is already out on Steam, and we have seen it in numerous showcases here and there before. And honestly, every time I see it, I think, yeah, that looks great. That looks like a future play-along game to me, I've got to say. Yeah. No, it has a great little simple art style. I think that even in the sort of talking head segment with Nama Takahashi, he said that he was creating this when he was a student, and he just wanted to turn it into a full game. It looked absolutely great. Very, very puzzle heavy, I think. But yeah, honestly, like, it has a sort of unique mechanic where this wee electric guy throws his head, and then that changes how things operate, and depending on where he's touching, electricity will flow through it, which moves certain parts of the map. Seriously, if you're interested in puzzle platformers, look this up, because it seems to be like a really honest puzzle platformer. Do you know what I mean? It is that and no more, and I sort of love it.
Quite
for
a
that.
pure version of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I totally agree. It's right up there for me as one of those like 1am games like Baba Is You that I just love to have kind of there available for when you're too tired to play Elden Ring and you need something else.
A lot of experience with that recently, Ellis, have you?
So next up was Soundfall. This from Drastic Games and Noodle Cake. It's a fighting rhythm game, a sort of looter shooter with an anime style. Looks sort of essentially in the same vein as Crypt of the Necro Dancer, but it's, I don't know, a bit more free flowing than that. I thought, it's less grid based than
it did. Yeah, definitely. It looked as if it had more sort of elements to it than that, I suppose,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
A bit more, just more open gameplay. So that's out today, interestingly, and yeah, check it out if those sort of rhythm games are up your street, I suppose. Next up was Wild Frost. This is from Deadpan Games and Chucklefish. I think even in all the material around this, it's been talked about as a Slay the Spire-like, but basically a roguelike deck builder. I didn't see much from this that was bringing anything new to the table, to be honest. Nice enough art style and all that, but if you're into your deck building games, you're going to be checking this out. It's coming out at holiday this year. Wild Frost, worth a look if that's your style of game. Not doing a lot for me. I'd probably rather just go and play Slay the Spire, I think. And then next up was Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, Mark. This from Landfall Games. This is a game that you've probably seen before. It's been out for ages on other platforms. It's coming to Switch in summer. It's just a physics-based kind of combat game. You control up to, I think, 100 warriors from sort of different styles. You throw them against each other. Looks like a bit of a laugh.
As it looks like sort of Rome Total War / Gang Beasts. It's a sort of wild trailer to watch, I've got to say, man. But yeah, if
it's not that, someone should make that. That sounds excellent. Speaking of interesting and excellent, the next game was Gunbrella, Mark. This from Doinksoft, who are the developers behind Gato Robato, which a lot of people might know, and also published by Devolver Digital. And if you look up this trailer, you will know that it's published by Devolver Digital without even having to look for their logo.
Oh, fuck yes, this is such a Devolver Digital game. I have to say that Gato Robato was one that was sort of on my radar.
Yeah.
It's hard, I didn't review maybe as well as I thought that it might, but I always sort of just remained there. But this looks like a total step up from that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that had such a cult following as well. But this is 2D noir punk action adventure game. You play as a detective. You have a gunbrella. That gunbrella not only shoots and deflects bullets, but allows you to like glide and swing around environments. I thought art style wise it looks really nice, nicely designed.
Lovely, yeah,
game.
really good.
Yeah, that sort of 2D pixel art really lends itself to that kind of side scrolling sort of shooting action game like that. They mentioned dark twists. There was some sort of creature with a big eye, so there's definitely more going on than it seems on the surface, at least. And that one's coming out in 2023.
Yeah, man, that was definitely one of the standouts of the show. As you said, it is clearly a Devolver game, like just immediately, obviously. But that is a sign of quality to me. Like, I love Devolver Digital, I really do. And this looks right up my street, to be honest with you. Yeah, definitely something I'll be checking out, I think.
Absolutely, nice one. So next up was We Are OFK from Team OFK. This is one that you'll probably be aware of. It's been shown at a few different showcases now. It's a music biopic game. It's sort of a visual novel, basically, by the looks of it, following a band who, God knows if they exist or not. It's a mystery wrapped around this game, but we think that they only exist for this game. It's an interesting concept. The thing that really stuck out to me was that they said in this trailer, which I don't think we'd heard before, that they are going to be releasing new episodes every week when this launches in the summer. So I'm curious to see. It's not a game that I'm going to be interested in. I'm probably not going to play it, but I am interested to see how people react to a weekly episodic release structure, because we've talked to death about episodic games, and I think that there's still mileage in it potentially, but no one's tried it at this pace before, I don't think, and I'm curious to see if it works.
Yeah, I've got to admit, at a weekly pace, you're sort of thinking, why don't you just put it all out? But no, genuinely, I think that is the thing that's interesting about this game. Like, how will that work? Will it work at all? And is that a useful format for some types of game, you know?
Definitely. Next up, probably the most interesting of the whole showcase to me, a game called Silt from Fireshine Games and Spiral Circus Games. So what looks like a two-person dev team made up of a former research scientist and a fine artist who've come together to make some games, which is really exciting. This, Mark, looks like a sort of... It looks like Inside to me. It's like an underwater Inside, I guess, like a bit like Absu meets Inside. Monochromatic undersea game. You possess sea creatures, you use them to solve puzzles and get through the environment. I thought this looked beautiful. A hand-drawn game, I think they said at one point. This is one that I'm really interested in, and it looks like it's coming out next month. Yeah,
this is really quite something, this game, to look at, I've got to say. It's immediately quite eerie and creepy about it, you know what I mean? And as you said, yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, to be honest with you. I think Inside Meets Abzu is probably exactly what it is, to be honest. Yeah, and that is no bad thing. That is a compliment, I assure you. Yeah, obviously... very puzzle heavy, possessing these creatures to solve various environmental style puzzles, of course. Yeah, it looks very, very interesting. Very, very keen to see how this lands, because visually, anyway, it looks absolutely stunning.
Yeah, and hadn't heard of it until this point, so yeah.
No, not at all.
The fact that it's out next month, yeah, keep an eye out for that one. Next up was Mini Motorways. This from Dinosaur Polo Club. and it's out today, so go and check it out if you're interested in drawing little roads to connect up the sort of transport infrastructure of semi-real cities. I think all the cities in it are based on real cities, so sort of
they seem to be, yeah.
Daily and weekly challenges. Looks like it could be really addictive. To me, it looked like it would be quite a fun, like, no-brain mobile game. I'm not sure if it is out on other platforms. I've not been aware of it before now. Probably not going to play it, if I'm totally honest, but an interesting little concept at least. Then up next we had Wayward Strand. This is coming from Ghost Pattern, and it's out in July this year. I think July 21st they said, actually. This is a sort of narrative adventure, a heartfelt narrative adventure, as they said, which, I don't know, that makes me kind of cringe slightly because you can kind of tell what sort of story you're going to get there. But to me, the thing that was interesting about this is you're playing as a teenage journalist and you're going about this sort of floating hospital, it seemed like, a hospital on a ship, and you are listening to people's stories. But the thing is, all the stories play out in real time, so you can choose what to listen to, when to walk away from characters, when to just eavesdrop on a conversation, and when to get involved. That can lead to all sorts of different sort of results and different bits of information that you get, which allows you to play through multiple times. I thought it was an interesting concept. Didn't love the art style, I've got to say, but something about that open-ended storytelling, I think, is an interesting spin.
Yeah, I've got to say I agree with you on the art style, but I think a lot of people will look at that art style and go, yeah, no, that looks beautiful.
Yeah.
But for me, I actually totally agree. It's not for me. I do think it's an interesting concept for a game, but yeah, probably not one that I'll get round to if I'm completely honest with myself, Liz.
Next up was Cult of the Lamb. This from Massive Monster and Devolver Digital. You've probably seen this before. It has been on a number of showcases. It feels like it's been floating around for quite a while now. It's coming later this year, still no actual date for it. It's an action roguelike game. Yeah, if you like action roguelike games, maybe check it out, but it doesn't do anything to me that makes it stand out from a packed crowd, to be totally honest.
I think the concept is interesting and the art style is cool, but I'm reading the Games Radar article here, Lewis, and it says Animal Crossing meets roguelike or whatever, and I'm just like, those are two things that I don't understand the appeal of, and this will not be for me.
And the final kind of full game that they showed off, Mark, was Another Crab's Treasure. This is from Team Aggro Crab, which are the developers behind Going Under, which some folks might have played. The thing about this is it's a Souls-like, but it's quite a cheery-looking Souls-like game set, I guess, under the sea, and you're playing as a crab, and it looks like it has genuine kind of Souls-style combat and exploration, at least, although I'm sure on a much smaller scale than we are used to right now. Challenging but approachable is what the dev team said. I just don't know why I wouldn't play a proper From Software Souls game instead of this, but maybe I'm being harsh there, Mark.
I think you're being a little bit harsh there. Honestly, I thought that this was a sort of fascinating take on the Souls. Like, it genuinely looks as if you're playing Sebastian from The Little Mermaid. You know what I mean? And that's a sort of style of environment that they're going with as well. Yeah, it seems to be sort of playing with sort of like interesting mechanics and stuff like that as well. They just seem to be having a good time with it, apart from anything as well. So now all Souls games are just so gritty and serious. And
that's a good point,
you know what I mean? It's just nice to see a light-hearted take on the genre, to be totally honest. Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting. It's something I'll be keeping my eye on. Will I ever get around to playing it? That remains to be seen, but I think that it's interesting. I'm glad this game exists. That's what I'll say about it, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's keep an eye out for it. It comes out in 2023 as things stand. So yeah, if you're looking for a slightly more light-hearted take on the Souls-like genre by then, Another Crab's Treasure might be the one for you. And just unusually, really, Nintendo ended this showcase with a montage, so I'm just going to rattle through the games that were shown there. We barely saw more than about 10 seconds of each, if even that, probably less. So we saw One Shot World Machine Edition, which is a 2016 game that's finally coming to Switch this summer. We saw Gibbon Beyond the Trees, which is coming to Switch later today. Looks like you swing around as a gibbon. Can't complain about that. You got Idol Manager, which is super anime, and it's out in August 25th. You've got Card Shark from Devolver Digital, and it's another card-based game. It's getting a free Switch demo later today. I'm not sure if we have an actual release date for that, but maybe check out the demo if Cards
That's
and
been
Devolver
on
Digital.
Other showcases.
I
and stuff
thought
like
I had
as
seen
well,
it before,
sure.
yeah.
Definitely.
From the wee bit that we saw, yeah. Cursed to Golf, which is a 2D action golf game. Dime a dozen at the moment, but looked alright, I thought, like from the little bit that we saw there. It's coming this summer. We had A Guidebook of Babel, which is coming to Switch this fall. And then finally, we had Opus Echo of Star Song, another visual novel, which is coming to Switch later today, if that's of interest to you. And that was the show, Mark. Thoughts?
Well, I think it's safe to say that there have been better indie showcases than this, to be honest with you. There was no one more thing, do you know what I mean? There was no big hitter in this at all, really. It was just a sort of honest indie showcase in a lot of ways. It was just a lot of smaller games. As we've discussed here, I actually think that there's a good number of really interesting games in here. Specifically, Electhead and Silt, I think, are standing out to the both of us. Yeah, it was fine. I was fine watching it. I didn't hate it.
Yeah, that's basically what I thought. There was nothing that I thought looked really bad. Sometimes you get these showcases and it's full of stuff that you think looks terrible or that you'd have absolutely no interest in, but some decent games here, a few interesting ideas worth watching. But yeah, I think we were both saying before, nothing here that we think will be kind of leading the awards nominations at the end of the year in the kind of indie categories, which is obviously what you hope to see in these showcases, but it wasn't to be this time.
I don't know, man. Gunbrella could take it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Devolver's weight behind that, absolutely. That will be getting talked about, I'm sure. I don't know, I guess the community had told itself we were getting a Hollow Knight Silksong update yet again. And
they always tell
do.
themselves
They always
that.
do.
They always tell themselves that. We cannot allow ourselves to believe until we get something directly from Team Cherry. We cannot allow ourselves to think about it. This is me talking to myself mostly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we brace ourselves each time, but I think, again, that's cast a bit of a shadow over this one for some people. Hold your breath till the summer. Surely in the old E3 slots we're going to get a Silksong update. But, you know, it's good for these games to get their kind of moment in the sun as well. And that's that, I think.
Nice one, man. Yeah, like I said, I think it was a good enough indie showcase. Like, did it have any heavy hitters in it? No. Were there a couple of interesting games that I'm now going to keep my eye on because of this showcase? Yes. Yeah. And to be honest with you, I don't think I can ask for much more from a Nintendo showcase. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely means a huge amount. I'd like to remind everyone that our PlayAlong game for this month, our PlayAlong games for this month list, are The Black Iris and Welcome to Elk. Both of these featured in itch.io's bundle of games that was put together in aid of Ukraine. The Black Iris is from a Scottish developer, a solo Scottish developer, I believe, and looks really, really interesting. And Welcome to Elk seems to be taking a sort of lore approach to real life stories, which has a really interesting art style in and of itself. 2 really, really interesting games. Both can be complete in a combined about 4.5 hours, we reckon.
Something like that, yeah, 4 to 5 hours, it seems like. Yeah.
Really short experiences, but really, really interesting, and something I'm definitely looking forward to.
Yep, really can't wait to get stuck into this, or to these rather. It'll be great to see what some of this kind of development on this scale looks like. And if you missed out on the Ukraine bundle, which is a shame if you did, but these games are available cheap as well, so no reason not to jump in, especially the Black Iris. I know that he was donating profits from the early runs of the game to food banks in Western Bartonshire here in Scotland as well, which is great, so support these people if you can. Yeah,
definitely. And as you just said there, like, we don't often delve into game development of this scale, and it would be really interesting to dip our toe in, and something that we should probably look to do more in the future list, if I'm honest. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.